Well. Hello, ladies. Welcome to another Monday Masterclass. Tonight, I am getting into one of the most hot topics that there possibly could be in our space, and that is good old gut health. So thank you for tuning in or watching the replay tonight. Who do I have on the phone? I don't know if you can drop into the chat. You may be driving. But if you can, drop into the chat and let me know who you are. I can't always tell from the phone numbers. Leslie, happy to have you here with me. Let me open the chat. Okay, the chat in Zoom is open. Now let me go to the group on Facebook. Streaming should be working. Put the comments in there. Okay, we are live. Yay. All right. Cool beans. All right, I got some great engagement. Thank you for answering the question to all of those of you who have answered the question in the group about your struggles with gut health, some of the things that you've been dealing with, questions you have for me. So I've got some great stuff we can get into tonight. Some of it we could easily go down rabbit holes. So I'm going to try to keep all of this at a 10,000 foot view. And then I'll try to drill down into some of the more specific questions closer to the end so that we don't go over. But if there's a lot more, we can always do a follow-up class on this because gut health is not a simple topic. It is a complex topic. Like I said, there's many rabbit holes. There's lots of different pieces and parts to it. But I'm going to at least break down the basics. So for those who are coming just for a general understanding, you'll have some real practical things you can take away from this. And then if you're struggling with deeper issues, hopefully I'll open the door to what some of those answers could be on the front end, or give you some more fuel to search and learn and heal, hopefully. So, of course, with a topic like this, I have to, oh, great, Helen, that must be you on the dial. Awesome. So glad you're here. Thank you for sharing your amazing update in the group the other day and being one of our champion chit chatters, I guess I'll say, champion chit chatters in the group. Really helps to see you all engaging and interacting and getting each other talking. And, you know, there's a lot of really incredible, intelligent people in our group who are pros at a lot of this stuff. So I'm not the only expert in the group. We have health coaches in there. We've got trainers. We've got professional athletes. We've got all kinds of really great, incredible people in our community. So please always feel free to drop questions in the group. If I don't see it right away, be sure to tag me if you do want me to see your question or comment in the group. But if I don't see it right away, somebody else will likely jump in and be able to answer or at least help point you in a direction. I've seen some really great comments from clients and other ladies in this community that are, like I said, many just as expert as I am on a lot of these topics. So that being said, on the topic of gut health, it is important that I give a little disclaimer at the beginning of this masterclass. I am not a doctor. And I certainly am not your doctor. I am not a medical professional, although I am a nutritional therapy practitioner, and I will share a little bit about what that means later on, because that's going to be one of the recommendations I give you if you do have deeper issues of the type of professional you could go to for that. I have really not been doing much with my nutritional therapy practice. I've been focused on ladies that want body composition changes. So everything's been really around that. But I've dabbled with clients, putting them through the process of nutritional therapy to hone my skills, practice a little bit more. And this topic is such a hot topic because many of my clients struggle with these things. And so many of you in the group, I don't think there's a woman alive that hasn't dealt with bloat, and pretty uncomfortable bloat and embarrassing bloat many times in our lives, throughout our lives, sometimes all the time. So I knew this would be a really important subject to speak on. And I will definitely give you some tips from the nutritional therapy space tonight on the call. And I'll give you some maybe unorthodox advice or information, kind of things that you can look a little bit deeper into, debunking some myths that you may have heard in the space. So without further ado, let's dive into that. But actually, I should finish that disclaimer and say, I am not your doctor. So anything you hear here, take it back to your doctor and run it by your doctor. If you're on a protocol with a doctor already, if you're already working through things like GI issues, digestion, IBS, GERD, SIBO, any of these things or any other things we talk about tonight, and you hear something here that piques your interest, go do more of your own research. Talk to your doctor, talk to a functional physician. I'll talk more about that later as well. And, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, what I always say to you at every single masterclass and as often as I can in the group, own your journey. You are in the driver's seat. You are in control. Never let anyone, that's including doctors, just tell you what it's supposed to be or what it is. Here's your diagnosis. This is what this means. You have to be on this medication for the rest of your life, or, you know, whatever it is that they're saying to you. There's never any harm in getting a second and third opinion, going and doing your own research, learning more on the subject, and seeking additional professional guidance, especially if what you've been doing doesn't seem to be working. All right, with that said, let's dive in. Hey, Nicole, so glad to have you here. Y'all are welcome to pop questions or comments at any time, and I will, as soon as I see them, I'll address them as we go, so you don't have to hold questions to the end. All right. All right, so some of the big things I saw questions about that I'll be sure to address tonight. Let me make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, great. Yep, got them all covered. Is about, let's see, what are gut issues, right? What is the gut? What are gut issues? How do you even know if you have gut issues? And then what are the first steps you should take to figure out if you have gut issues and what you need to do to heal? Some other big hot topics: fiber. Is it necessary? Do we need to have a certain amount? How do we stay regular without it? Probiotics and prebiotics are a big topic. Should I be on them? Acid reflux and GERD, very, very common situation. Other gut health supplements, you know, there's a gamut of them, and I'll go through what some of those are and some of my recommendations and what I kind of would avoid. Let's see, lots of IBS, a lot of the things that you all have mentioned you've dealt with, a lot of IBS, inflammation in your body in different ways, acid reflux, indigestion. Yep, a lot of the constipation, bloating, or the opposite, diarrhea, right? Urgent bowels, food intolerances, veggies, processed meats. There's a question about that too. Yes, so there's some good stuff. Okay, lots of great stuff to talk about. There was one I didn't write down, and now I just lost it. I'm sure I'll remember when we get to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and first just address that first question. I think it was from Shayna. Thanks, Shayna, for sending that in. How do you know you have gut issues? What are some of the symptoms to look out for? And it's some of the things that I just mentioned because you all mentioned it. Acid reflux, that heartburn feeling at meals, in between meals, all different times of the day. That was me at 20 something years old. I was like 24, 25 years old with terrible acid reflux. Sure sign that there was something wrong in my system with my digestion. I went to a GI doc for years. I was on meds for years. Got off all of those by changing my diet and my lifestyle. So we'll talk about that. So GERD, acid reflux. GERD stands for gastrointestinal esophageal syndrome. You notice that a lot of these are syndromes. IBS is a syndrome. Syndrome basically means it's a collection of symptoms. It's a name for a collection of symptoms. So it doesn't mean that it's not really like a diagnosis, like this is the root cause of this thing, and we're going to heal this root cause. It's like, here's a collection of symptoms. We don't know what to say about it, so we're going to call it something. That's typically when you see syndrome, that's usually what that means, which doesn't give you a lot of hope, right? Because it's like, well, if typically in an allopathic traditional medicine space, if they don't have a pharmaceutical they can give you, it's not going to be a diagnosis, unfortunately. So everything revolves around, when you're going to medical doctors, traditional medical doctors, everything revolves around, okay, symptoms, what does this mean? What do I prescribe? That is what they're taught. So they're not taught to heal through food. They're not taught to heal through lifestyle changes. Unfortunately, you're going to end up on pharmaceuticals if you go that route, or surgery or something more serious. Okay, so talking about healing, right? Talking about root cause healing, which you'll hear a lot in the nutritional therapy space. So if you are dealing with some of these issues, and I don't know if I went through the whole laundry list, I don't think I did, I stopped at GERD, but acid reflux or GERD, indigestion, stomach pain, you're just realizing that you get a lot of stomach pain after meals, stomach distension, where your stomach is out like a basketball, or other forms of bloating, just feeling that bloat, that discomfort, kind of like that gassy feeling, a lot of belching or never belching, a lot of flatulence, constipation, diarrhea, anything on that spectrum, not being able to keep it balanced, let's say, going from one to the other, or always having one or always having the other. Other gut things. I mean, those are the typical symptoms you hear the most. Yeah, that's pretty much typically the symptoms you're going to hear. It's just all that discomfort with digestion. I like to call it digestive discomfort is what I used to call it, to try to not have to use some of those other not so cute words. So that's typically what we say when we say gut problems or gut issues, right? You're having these digestive symptoms that are uncomfortable and impact your life negatively. All right, so how do we get to the bottom of figuring out what's going on there? There's so many things out there that are going to say, okay, here's your solution, gut health solution, gut health program, gut health protocol, gut health supplements, right? Everything has gut health listed on it. One thing I can definitely say is, please do not just go and run out and buy things that say gut health or fixes your gut, or don't just go and buy something. If you see a supplement on a shelf or being promoted online, or in a YouTube video or whatever, go and research what is in that thing and why they are purporting that it works, before you just start throwing things at the problem without understanding what the real problem is. So first and foremost, figuring out what the real problem is, okay? One thing I can definitely say is that if you think you have food intolerances, and let's say you go and do a food intolerance test, and you find out that you're intolerant to a whole bunch of a laundry list of foods, it's likely that you have a deeper problem. It's not likely that just all of these random foods, you just developed a sensitivity to these foods. What is happening is likely that you have what's called leaky gut, or intestinal impermeability, intestinal permeability, excuse me. Permeability, meaning that the lining of your gut, the cell walls are supposed to be tight, but these tight junctions loosen up, and then things, amino acids, proteins are able to get through where they're not supposed to into your bloodstream. And now you have this inflammation because your body is going to have an inflammatory response, create an inflammatory response to send help to the area because it's inflamed, because these things are not supposed to be there. So when the immune system kicks in, it goes into hyperdrive, and now you have all this inflammation. Inflammation is there to heal, right? It's like when you get a cut and it gets worse before it gets better, kind of when you think about the bruise, right? It has to inflame and then anti-inflame to heal. So that same thing will be happening if you have this leaky gut. So things are getting into the system that are not supposed to be there. It should be kept within those walls, and they should move through the digestive tract and then be eliminated. When that doesn't happen, you start developing all these food sensitivities because all of these amino acids are getting into your system, and now the body's seeing them as enemies. So if it could be all the foods you eat on a regular basis, now all of a sudden you're sensitive to them. That's the sign of a deeper issue. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about how we look at this from a nutritional therapy perspective. There's this concept in nutritional therapy that digestion is a north to south process. It starts in the brain, actually. It doesn't even start in the mouth. It starts in the brain. It starts about the way that you smell food, think about food. You start salivating before the food is even present. Just thinking about lunch or dinner, or what you're going to have, and like getting excited about it, your mouth starts to salivate. This is all preparing your body to digest food. So it starts there, and then we go into the cephalic phase, which is where in your mouth, where you start to break down, you start to get some enzymes that are breaking things down in your mouth. Then you go into mechanical and then chemical digestion within your system. So now it's going down your esophagus, into your stomach, into your small intestine, and then into your large intestine, colon, and then out. So that whole entire process, there's a lot of steps there, and there's a lot of organs that are involved and internal systems that are involved to make all of that happen. So in nutritional therapy, when we're treating things, or I guess we can't say we treat, diagnose, or cure, but when we are working with a client who's experiencing these kinds of issues, we look at a myriad of things to say, okay, what part of the process seems to have some dysfunction? Because if we can catch it upstream, then we could correct the imbalances before they become a bigger issue downstream. So when you hear things like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, at that point, it's already gotten through. Think about all those levels of digestion we've already passed through before it gets to the small intestine. Once we have a problem in the small intestine, now there's a bigger issue that we have to solve for. But we can identify some of these symptoms that are showing us that there's some dysfunction earlier upstream in the process. And then if we can address it then and fix it then, it may never have to get to that. So I say all this because as we talk about some of these symptoms, I'm going to give you some tips here on identifying kind of where you're at in that stream and what you might be able to do before it becomes a bigger issue. And then if it does become a bigger issue, I'll give you some advice there. Hey, Crystal joined us. Yay, glad to have you here, love. Okay, so somebody asked about heartburn, acid reflux, GERD. I'm glad you did, because that was another one of my big issues, like I said. And that was something that with me did not just get fixed with removing a lot of foods. So before I go into this piece, there's a couple different sides to gut health healing, let's say. There's the fixing of the dysfunction, And then there's the supporting of the proper function or optimal function of your digestive system. So there's kind of two sides to the coin here. And a lot of the time, with the reason why people get such great results with symptoms on an elimination diet, like paleo, AIP, specific carbohydrate diet, keto, carnivore, low FODMAP diet, and all the like, is because they have removed the irritants. They have removed the things that are causing the dysfunction or irritating the dysfunction, because it could have gotten to a place, like I said, with the leaky gut, where you now have some dysfunction that was caused from the grains and all the things that were going through your system all that time. Removing the grains, removing the dairy, let's say, or removing FODMAPs could be, it is the very first step. You've got to remove the irritant first, right? It's like sitting in a polluted room full of smoke and breathing in that smoke. You can't heal sitting there. You have to remove yourself from the situation and get to clean air first. But just getting into clean air may not fix what could have already been damaged from inhaling the smoke all that time. I just came up with that on the spot. So I think that sounds like that's a pretty good analogy there. So that's kind of what, when we're embarking on these certain types of healing diets, that's what we're doing. We're trying to get rid of the things that are irritating our system and causing these problems. And that will lead to a lot of relief, hopefully. If you have tried that and you haven't gotten relief, then I would say you may be in a position where you need to try removing more things. So my first tip, and I'm kind of jumping around here tonight, but I think I'll do a little, I know, I'm going to make a promise here. I'm going to do a gut health cheat sheet, we'll call it. So you'll have some like big picture notes you can take away without having to watch the whole hour and a half later, unless you want to geek out on it. Okay, so my first tip for you is to know yourself. As I say all the time, learn yourself, learn your symptoms. And to Shana's question about how do you know if you have issues, keep a food and mood journal. And this is another downloadable I'm gonna give you, if I didn't already. And if I did already, then I'll drop a post in the group with a link to where it lives. But food and mood journal, and this is what nutritional therapy practitioners use with their clients. It is a very detailed, this is not the same as tracking your food in a macro tracker. This is a detailed view of your day, and you do this for, usually a few days. You're listing everything from the time you went to sleep and the time you woke up to what time you had that first meal. What were the foods in the first meal? Did you have any supplements with it? How much, what liquids did you consume? How are you feeling? What are your digestive symptoms? What is your mood like? Because here's the other piece, y'all. There is something I probably could do a whole separate masterclass, or maybe bring in someone. I've been thinking for a while about bringing in guest speakers. So perhaps I could bring someone in to talk about the vagus nerve, because I know for many people, they've never heard of it. But it is the gut-brain connection that we're hearing so much about these days. The vagus nerve runs from the gut to the brain, and a lot of mental health disorders or syndromes or issues, struggles, can be related to gut dysfunction. So the father of medicine, Hippocrates, said all disease begins in the gut, and our immune system lives in the gut. So if there are issues with the gut, it can actually play out into many other bodily systems. So your endocrine system, your nervous system, your respiratory system, your blah, blah, blah. Cardiovascular system. So it can play out in many other ways. So if you're having other symptoms, if you're keeping a food and mood journal, track everything. If you have back pain that day, if you had a headache that day, write it all down, because it could all be relevant. I always like to say we're not in a vacuum, right? We're not living in a lab. Like, we're not only looking at food and only looking at what our stomach feels like. It has to do with our entire body. So keep a food and mood journal, identify any symptoms you're having, start to just really become present with yourself. Do this for 3 days, it doesn't even have to be a whole week, but get really granular. It's kind of like if you're, I remember working in a 9-to-5, very traditional office, and they did like an efficiency check at one point where we had to write down every 30-minute block or hour block of our day how we spent our time. It can feel very tedious, but that's how they identify gaps, and where can we be more efficient. So it's the same kind of concept. It's like, take 3 days and say, I'm going to be hyper vigilant about what's happening within my body. And so I'm going to write it all down and keep track of it, because you might find patterns that way. You might identify, oh, I added this spice to this meal, and then every time I use that spice, I get the heartburn. You can start making those connections. So that's really, really key. That's going to be my number one tip walking away from this. And I'll summarize those at the end too. All right, so that's kind of identifying the issues, right? What are my issues? What are my symptoms? And then what could be a trigger for this? What are the triggers that could cause me to feel this way? It may not necessarily be cut and dry, like it's the eggs, or it's the nuts, or it's the dairy. It could be something else, but that's a good place to start. Okay, then try an elimination diet. And I did another class, I'm forgetting what I called that one now, because it was about body composition, but it was about food selection. That was the name of that masterclass. So in the food selection masterclass, I spoke a little bit more in depth about elimination diets, different types, how I recommend doing an elimination diet, how long you should do it, all those kinds of things. But that's the removing the stressor, so to speak. Then we have to look at, is there a greater problem? Maybe you have gone carnivore and a lot of your symptoms improved. Or maybe it's only been 3 weeks and none of your symptoms have improved. Or maybe they've gotten a little bit worse at first. And here's something to know, that whenever you're doing an elimination diet or changing your diet drastically, regardless in any way, you could have some Herxheimer reactions. You can have some die-off reactions. It's basically like the symptoms that you have can get worse before they get better. So big tip here is that whatever you try, whether it's a protocol with a doctor, an elimination diet on your own, or any other number of things, trying supplements, which we'll talk about in a bit, see it through. Don't give it a week or 2 or 3, give it 4 or 6 weeks, 30 to 90 days, and really give it a full try. And, especially if you're on a protocol with a functional doctor, do not cheat. Follow the diet, especially if you're using herbals or supplements of any kind. You do not want to screw up the results by putting those irritants back into your body. So if you're doing something like that, if you're doing this diet for that purpose, it's not just for body composition, you owe it to yourself not to cheat. And I have a cheat masterclass as well, if you need a little 1-2 punch on that one. Okay, so eliminate the dysfunction, or eliminate the irritants or the triggers. Then it gets down into treating the problem. If let's say you've done an elimination diet, carnivore is a good example because it's kind of like the ultimate elimination diet. Let's say you've done carnivore for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and you're like, nope, nothing is getting any better. Hopefully maybe at the 6-month mark, you seek some diagnostic. But this is where I would say, okay, it's time to get some functional diagnostic testing. Find out what else could be happening that might need to be solved for, because in many cases, the diet isn't going to be enough in that case. It's like I said, removing the irritant, but it's not healing the injury, let's say. So this is where I would What I recommend, what I think is a great thing to do, is getting a comprehensive stool panel. And this is the kind of thing that can be done with a functional doctor or a functional medicine practitioner of some sort. There are nutritional therapy practitioners that are functional nutritional therapy practitioners, meaning they can order functional labs, order and interpret functional labs. I can't do that. Unfortunately, they stopped offering that by the time I did it. Eventually, I might go that route because I tend to like to geek out on these things. But I can't order labs for you, FYI. But I do have places that I can recommend that you go for that. But I would say work with a functional doctor or functional practitioner to get some functional diagnostic tests. And when you meet with that doctor, that practitioner, sit down with them, you explain everything. And if you've already done a food and mood journal, then you're in a better position to tell that doctor how they can help you. If you go in and you just say, oh, I get bloated, and you can't give them any details about when it's happening, what it might be connected to, they're going to ask you all those questions. So do some of that legwork on the front end, and then you can go in and then they can tell you what tests they would recommend that you get, and you can get to a treatment protocol at that point. Typically, they're going to have everything from, I would say, if I'm going to give you any advice on what not to get, food intolerance tests for the most part. I mean, they're likely going to point to leaky gut, as I talked about earlier. So it's a lot of the time, those are just not going to be that beneficial. And it would be more beneficial to do some testing related to SIBO or a comprehensive stool panel, which is going to tell you actually about the bacteria in your gut. Do you have anything overgrown? Do you have undergrown? Like, do you not have enough of some good bacteria? It's going to tell you what your microbiome gut bacteria look like in terms of the population and diversity and all that. Okay. Let's see, what else did I want to make sure I cover? Cool. Okay, let's get into some of the questions and specifics that people had. And then I'm going to give you my top tips summary at the end, beyond the first one, which is learning yourself and knowing your symptoms. Tori, great question. This is going to tie in with some other things. What do you think about the concept of repairing your gut after antibiotics, especially when you are switching to carnivore? I was going to mention that antibiotics can be one of the things that can cause gut issues down the line, especially if you were young when you got them. How many of us had tubes in our ears? I had tubes in my ears as a baby, and I got on antibiotics very young, and I was premature. So I'm sure I was on antibiotics for all kinds of things as a baby, which means my gut bacteria probably just never even developed the way it needed to, which I had all my digestive issues like my entire life. They didn't just show up at a certain point in time. I dealt with them from a very young age. So it's very likely that you've had bouts of antibiotics. If you've had bouts of antibiotics, that can be playing into some of your digestive problems. But yes, I will definitely get to that because that kind of ties in with the probiotic question. So I'll definitely get to that. Okay, so let's start with fiber. Okay, big hot topic is fiber. Do we need fiber to be regular? Absolutely not. And what you will hear from many carnivores is that, especially during the transition, when first cutting out all the fiber, you're just going and going and going like nobody's business. There is no holds barred. It is, if you've been constipated, typically you're going to see the opposite when you go carnivore, when you drop the fiber out. What fiber does is that it bulks up the stool. So it actually creates more stool. It's going to be more difficult to pass. So the advice to take more fiber to help it pass when you're constipated, I've seen much better results going the opposite direction. And so one of my tips that I'll leave you with at the end here is to stay regular, which is a question we got, right? How do I stay regular or get back to being regular? There's a few key things you can do, especially on a carnivore ketogenic diet or a ketogenic diet that's lower in the fibers, right? Adequate fat, consuming adequate fat, salt, and water is going to be key to proper elimination. And this is with or without all the fibers, honestly. Even if you are still consuming vegetables, fibers, and things of that nature, dial in your water, your electrolytes, and your fats, getting those healthy fat sources. I see the most issues with constipation in clients that are super high protein and too low fat. So they're trying to digest all this protein, but they don't have the fat. Fat actually helps lubricate and move things through the system. So fats, water, salt is going to be your dream solution for the most part to cleaning your system out. If you think about it, what a colon cleanse is, it's salt water. If you've ever heard of the saltwater flush, or if you ever got your electrolytes wrong, put too much and drank it, you'll see what happens on the other side. So if you have those three things in place, that's going to be a game changer for regularity without the fiber. And no, the fiber is not necessary for regularity. In many cases, I can see it making constipation worse for people, especially when you're putting in all of these fiber supplements. So that I would avoid for sure. And a lot of these high fiber vegetables, if you're eating them in large amounts, they can cause a lot of these other issues that people are having. It can be very irritating to the system. And if you look at all of those classes of vegetables that they've created these healing diets to help heal your system, they've removed all of these different classes of fibrous vegetables and fruits. It's for a reason. Those are irritating. Okay, so that's the topic of fiber. Basically, don't be afraid. You don't have to hit that 20 grams or 25 grams or whatever arbitrary number the government put out there and said we all should be consuming. Many people out there are thriving without it, myself included. Okay, so next up, probiotics and prebiotics. All right, this is just being touted everywhere, right? Everybody should be on a probiotic. Oh, make sure you're getting your prebiotics with your probiotics. My advice always to people on the subject of probiotics is take a probiotic if you know what bacteria you need. So if you have gone and gotten those diagnostic tests, you've gotten that stool test, you've figured out, hey, I have this overgrown and I don't have enough of this. Or Tori's question is a great one. You've been on a round of you've been on a round of antibiotics, or even worse, when you've had to be on antibiotics for an extended period of time for some kind of infection. Then I could see adding in some probiotics to repopulate the gut bacteria. And you'll see this on many gut protocols with practitioners as well, that they'll do an inoculation period, taking out all those irritants and getting you on an antibiotic or or really therapeutic levels of herbals to cleanse, kill off the bad bacteria. But let me say this too, we are not supposed to have zero of even the bad bacteria. Like, we're not meant to just not have any bacteria in our gut. So, it's not that you need to have zero candida and zero of any of these other pathogenic bacteria, but having that balance and not allowing the pathogenic bacteria to be overgrown and overpopulate the system is fine. But for many people, especially if they're dealing with things like SIBO, they have, that's the situation that they're in, and they're going to need to do something more than just change their diet. So, and I've gone the herbal route for things like that before. But if it's really bad, then sometimes you're just going to have to go the route of the heavier antibiotics. It will take longer to heal if you're on an herbal protocol. So you may just want to hit it with the antibiotics, and then you're going to pretty much clean out the gut. But this is why I say to work with a practitioner, because, for instance, when I was in a short-term period of healing my gut, with protocols, we had a 4-week period, where I was on those herbals, and then a 4-week period when I was on a very specific probiotic. So it wasn't just going out and buying something off the shelf, which I highly discourage you from a lot of the time I see women just going out and buying probiotics. And they're like, well, this just says it has such and such million, or it has all these different strains. You don't know that you need that. So the biggest thing is find out for you what you need and then follow that protocol. And that way too, you're working with a practitioner, you can tell them what's going on with you. We did the probiotics for 4 weeks. I always had more symptoms with them, and then we discontinued them, and I thrived after that. So working with a practitioner that can change the plan and has an end date, and these should not be things that we're just living on because we heard that they're good for us. And that kind of goes for anything. I always say, don't just take someone's word for it, especially if it's in the mainstream media. So probiotics and prebiotics, I wouldn't say to run out and get. The prebiotics are basically the fiber that feeds the probiotics. So a lot of the time the supplements will come as a pair, or there are prebiotic foods you can eat. I can tell you from personal experience, I have never done well with those prebiotic foods. Those are, a lot of the time, they're the FODMAPs, fructooligosaccharides, disaccharides, polyols, fructooligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. I was like, I know I'm missing one. But a lot of time those oligosaccharides are in those prebiotics, and that can cause more problems than they're worth. Okay, acid reflux and GERD. Most of the time, you've been taught that this is a result of having too much stomach acid. So you've been given antacids, you've been popping Tums and Pepcid, you've been given omeprazole or Prilosec or one of these things. They just tell you to take it for the rest of your life. I know for me, they never told me to change anything with my diet, and they just told me that I'd have to be on these for my whole life. Well, these medications then led to lowering my stomach acid over time, and now I still have a difficulty digesting without supports. So what are these supports, and what can you do if this could be you? For one, there's a home test you can do. It's not diagnostic, it's not clinical, but you can do a baking soda test. And I dropped it in the comments, but I'll drop it again after the masterclass in the comments. So you can see I have a video Bronson and I did last year on how to do the baking soda test at home. It's basically, you drink this water with baking soda, you wait to see if you burp. He burped right away. I didn't burp at all. And if you don't burp within, I think it's 10 minutes, pretty much you have low stomach acid. Now you can go to a practitioner and get an actual hypochlorhydria test to find out if you actually do have the low acid. But it's a very similar test. They gave me something to drink, and then they had a way of monitoring my acid levels, and I never had that production. So if you have, a lot of the time, if you've been on these medications for acid reflux or popped all those antacids all those years, you've been killing your body's natural ability to create stomach acid. So when you eat especially large meals of protein, right? This isn't true for like a little snack that doesn't have a lot of protein in it. But if you're having a protein heavy meal, and for a lot of you, and I'm not going to say you all say it, but I've seen it in the interwebs, always saying, oh, it's so hard to digest meat. Meat is actually the easiest thing for our bodies to naturally digest. So It's not harder for our bodies to digest meat. It's harder for our bodies to digest cellulose and plant matter. So if you're having a hard time digesting meat, you probably have low stomach acid. Majority of the population does, not only because they've been fed all these antacids, but also if you're not eating enough protein, which I can say probably 90% of women in general are not eating nearly enough protein, unless they've gotten into this kind of a space where they've learned the importance of protein. And then most of us really had to work hard to eat enough protein, to build muscle, to support our bodies in this way. But most of us were not just naturally doing that. So over your lifetime, if you're not eating a lot of protein, your body doesn't need to produce a lot of stomach acid. You're not asking it to. You're not giving it anything that it needs the acid to break down. So over time, low protein ingestion can cause low stomach acid. And there are some vitamins and mineral supports that we can do. That's some of the stuff with nutritional therapy that we do, that we can recommend protocols with particular supplements that can also help to boost your body's natural stomach acid and help your digestion and support your digestive system. So that's that other side of the coin I was talking about when I said there's the dysfunction and there's the supporting the optimal or optimizing the function of your digestive system. And these are some things we can do with certain things, like B vitamins, for example, is one of them. And magnesium is another. So that's with the stomach acid piece, the acid reflux piece. If you notice that you don't feel like you're digesting your meals, particularly with a lot of protein, do that at home, test, see if you think you might have low stomach acid. You can go get the actual diagnostic test with a functional doctor if you want. But then you could test out using some apple cider vinegar. And there was a question somebody asked about tricks with apple cider vinegar. I put apple cider vinegar in my large jug of keto raid that I make every day with my electrolytes and my water. And then, so I'm sipping on it all day, and it has like, in a large 72-ounce thing, I put probably like a tablespoon or two of apple cider vinegar in it. So I'm not tasting the apple cider vinegar, but it's in my water that I drink all day. And then with my meals, I will pour a little bit into a shot glass with some water and some salt, and I'll shoot that with my meals. I would not do this first thing in the morning, because first thing in the morning, you should naturally have the highest stomach acid you're going to have all day. And then as you break down, as you have a meal or two or three, and if you notice this is another symptom, that you're okay with the first meal of the day, maybe the second meal of the day, but by the time you finish that third meal of the day in the evening, you are just not digesting. That could be a stomach acid issue. So that's what you can look into there. And there are some other heavier supplements that I would not recommend just trying on your own without working with a practitioner. And that would be things like betaine HCl, which is basically a hydrochloric acid you're taking, which I still take with my meals, in addition to the apple cider vinegar. But those are things that can help you digest your food in the meantime, because here's the key, and this is the piece with nutritional therapy as well, when we're trying to heal through food. If we're not breaking down and assimilating and using the nutrients from our food, if our body's not getting the nutrition it needs from our food, the micronutrition, we're not going to be able to heal. So we could be doing the perfect, best diet in the world for healing, but if our body is dysfunctional, we're not getting what we need from that food anyway, and then we can't rebuild and repair. So these are the kinds of things that the acid reflux or the stomach acid issue is an upstream issue. So if you can address that, then you can avoid some of these downstream issues. Okay. All right, let's get into some of the other supplements. Somebody asked about, Leslie was asking, yes. Would like to know what you have found that has helped Digestive enzymes. Okay, so digestive enzymes are another thing. They're supposed to be produced by your pancreas, pancreatic enzymes to help break down your foods. So we have different enzymes that break down different macronutrients. So we have lactase that breaks down lactose. All my lactose intolerant people, it's not that you're lactose intolerant, it's that you lack the lactase enzyme. Oh, Lord. You are lacking the lactase enzyme to break down lactose. So if you see, this is an interesting thing. I actually saw this. I've been looking into yogurts and cottage cheese and like dabbling back into dairy. And so I was reading, because Good Culture is a cottage cheese I've been very interested in lately. And they have a lactose-free version. And I was like, oh, let me look at what they did with this. And all they did was they added the lactase enzyme. So when you see lactose-free products, it doesn't mean that they removed the lactose. Some things can get a lot of the lactose out, like whey products, certain whey products, the whey isolates, for example, they've removed a lot of the lactase or the lactose. But a lot of the time when it's milks or things of that nature, they still have lactose in them, but they've added lactase to help you break down the lactose. So just a little aside there. But that's another reason why dairy products could bother people, because if you have an issue with your enzymes, if you're not producing the enzymes that you need to break down your food, a digestive enzyme could work. So specifically for my lactose intolerant folks, if you notice that that's really the only issue is with dairy, you can pick up some lactase, just the lactase enzyme, and that may help with digestion of the dairy products. For others of you, you may need a more comprehensive digestive enzyme spectrum. We have, oh my gosh, I should grab my bottles because I take these as well with my meals. So for fats, we have lipase. For proteins, we have protease. For carbs, we have amylase, or sugars, amylase. Lactase is actually, lactose is a sugar, is a carb, so lactase and amylase. And there's some others as well, but those are pretty much the big ones. So a digestive enzyme that has a full spectrum could help with all of those foods. Pancreatin is a good example of something that's going to have pepsin and what else does pancreatin have in it? Protease. It should have the protease. But these are things that, once again, I would recommend working with a practitioner to understand your particular symptoms and what you might need or be ready for, and not just run out and try things. Because a lot of the time, you can end up making things worse if you don't need it. For instance, if you try taking beta-NHCl, you do the ACV, and you get much worse heartburn, then you probably don't need it. You actually could have an issue with high stomach acid. Typically, it's the other way around, but for some people with certain gastric issues, ulcers, for example, taking apple cider vinegar or beta-NHCl while you have active ulcers will make the problem worse. And I've also had ulcers, so I can speak to that as well. I was not taking those supplements at that time. So another reason why it's good to work with a practitioner on these things. L-glutamine. L-glutamine is touted as a powerful gut healing supplement. It is basically, it's an amino acid, and it helps to repair the gut lining. So things like leaky gut, L-glutamine can be great. I still take L-glutamine. I'm thinking if there's any other supplements. There's a lot of supplements, and they're just going to be really particular to the individual and the specific issue. But like I said, I would not run out and get fibers. I would not do probiotics and prebiotics unless you know you need them and you know which ones you need. Yeah, I would try with the apple cider vinegar first if you're thinking that stomach acid could be an issue. L-glutamine is a pretty safe. Also, aloe is another one that's generally used for leaky gut. And those are pretty safe. You don't have to worry about like over consuming. And trust me, aloe does not taste good unless you're getting some aloe drink from the supermarket that's filled with sugars and crap, which highly I would not recommend. These kinds of therapies are therapeutic doses, and this is why you need to work with a practitioner to get them most of the time. But that's just a few of the basics. And then, of course, I always talk about like the general supplements that can be good for people, or like maybe a multivitamin, maybe some omega-3s if you're not consuming seafood. Vitamin D is pretty much something that everybody's deficient in. Magnesium, and magnesium can be incredible for a lot of gut issues. But those are kind of like general recommended supplements anyway for most people. Let's see, is there anything else I didn't address? Okay, here's something nobody really asked, but like, let's say you went carnivore and you are just, it's a lot to handle with going to the bathroom all the time, being extra regular, right? You could add back in some higher fiber foods and go with the safer ones, right? Like once again, don't go out and buy psyllium husk and inulin powders and all of that stuff, but like avocado, some things that are less likely to irritate your system, but can give a little bit more bulk to your stool, so you're not just going all the time. But also I would really look, and this is for any IBS, IBS C or D, looking at the foods and trying to find that connection and that pattern. Is there a pattern there? Do I have anything artificial? Because artificial sweeteners of any kind, natural or unnatural, can definitely have impact on your gut. Bloat, gas, diarrhea, constipation, all of that, depending on what it is. Y'all have heard me talk about this before, but Quest bars are garbage. They're putting corn fibers in there. They're putting most packaged products, keto or protein products in particular, are filled with a bunch of crap fibers. Just not even like, if you're going to eat fiber at all, do it from fibrous veggies, but certainly not from these keto products. And 9 times out of 10, when people are still having issues with IBS, when they're on an animal-based ketogenic diet, it's probably from the extras, those little extras that are coming in that are not whole foods. So I think with that being said, I'm pretty sure I covered everything. So I'm going to go back up and give you my top tips. I think I have 5 or 6 tips to leave you with. And if I miss anything, I will do another gut health, a more in-depth one in the future. All right, so number 1 was learn yourself and your symptoms. Keep a food and mood journal so you can find the patterns in your own symptoms. If nothing else, you'll now have that as notes to take to a doctor. Secondly, and this is something I haven't talked about yet, but when I mentioned that digestion actually starts in the brain and then goes to the cephalic phase in the mouth before it ever gets into our stomach and our gut, eat slowly and mindfully without distractions. If you're constantly eating on the run, eating on the go, eating while you're working, eating while you're distracted, that may be the cause of your gut issues. It may have nothing to do with what you're consuming. How you eat is just as important as what you eat. So eat slowly and mindfully without distractions and chew thoroughly. Count your chews. Try to get 20 to 30 chews. I guarantee, it sounds silly, but I guarantee that could be it. That could be the whole problem right there. Okay. Number 3, I talked about digestive enzymes and stomach acid. Well, one of the things that you can do to naturally support your body's healthy function, your digestive system's healthy function, By utilizing your pancreatic enzymes and your stomach acid that you have naturally and not diluting it is to avoid drinking excessive fluids with your meals. So drinking your water and your electrolytes separately from your meals. For me, I just take a few sips just to get my supplements down, the supplements that I take with my meals. Those that are in capsule form. And otherwise, I'm drinking my water in between my meals when I wake up in the morning, in between my meals, about, no later than an hour before bed, if I can help it. So be sure to hydrate properly. Remember, I talked about how important hydration is for proper elimination. So you do want to hydrate properly. Make sure you're drinking your water and your electrolytes, but do it away from your meals. That's kind of a 2-in-1. Number 4, eat enough healthy fats and proteins from nutrient-dense whole food sources to sustain proper function of your body. So healthy fats, remember, fats also help to lubricate and move things through your system. So don't be doing PSMF as a lifestyle, protein sparing modified fast. Don't just be eating nothing but protein and eating barely any fat because you're afraid of gaining fat. That is not going to work for you as a lifestyle. That will screw up your digestion because you're not getting what your body needs from the fats. Fats are also very necessary for vitamin absorption, for A, D, E, and K absorption. You're not going to absorb it without the fats. So any of your fat soluble vitamins. And your proteins. You want to be getting the majority of your meals from real food, whole food sources. It's okay to supplement with a protein shake here and there, or to have that occasional treat, but don't let that be a regular part of your life, a daily thing. Like I said, those protein bars and a lot of the protein powders are filled with a bunch of other garbage. Okay, number 5, you've heard me talk about this before, manage your stress levels and your sleep. To be able to properly digest, we have to be in a parasympathetic state. That means the rest and digest state. So we talked about the vagus nerve that's running from your brain to your gut. If you are in this heightened, stressed state, and this can be, immediately after a workout, like if you're trying to eat immediately after a workout or before a workout, and then you go work out and you're trying to digest your food, that's not going to work out well. You want to be in that calm state. So let's say you are at work and you can't step away from your desk. At least don't try to do work while you're eating, if you can help it. And one of the simplest things you can do to calm your system quickly is some breathing techniques. Slow inhale, slower exhale. Do that 4 or 5 times before you have your meal, so that your body starts to perceive that we are calm. Everything is okay. We don't have to run from a tiger. We can eat and we can digest. And then your sleep. Same thing I always say about fat loss. Your sleep, impaired sleep is going to impair everything in your body, all your systems. So sleep is absolutely key. And then bonus tip number 6 is, if you've already dialed in all of these basics, so those top 5 are all basics, right? Tracking what's going on with you, knowing your symptoms, eating slowly and mindfully without distractions, and chewing thoroughly, avoiding excessive fluids with your meals, but hydrating properly throughout the day, eating enough healthy, nutrient-dense fats and proteins from whole food sources, and managing your stress and sleep. For many of us, if we really were honest, all 5 of those are not dialed in. So what's not dialed in? And I can promise you, your stress and your sleep probably have a bigger impact on your digestion than you're giving them credit for. But if you've now checked all of those boxes, let's say you're like, I'm going to dial all of that in now and make sure the top 5 are in check, and you're still experiencing issues, this is when I would say seek help from a functional practitioner, get some diagnostic testing, or at least get a consult and get some advice on what to start with, what to try, without just running out and doing what some article on Google or some video on YouTube said to do. Okay, I think that is it. If anybody has any more questions or things that have come up, or this like triggered anything that you want to know more about, drop a comment. If you're watching the replay, drop a comment. I'll see it, and we can dive deeper on a future masterclass. Does anybody have any questions who are here with me live? Any aha moments? I think Alice said she learned the hard way. I think that was in regards to the transition to carnivore, I would imagine. Yeah. And I experienced that because I will have bouts where I come off of carnivore and I have other things, and then I go back and then it's like, oh, yeah, we're cleaning out. It's happening again. All the more reason to get really in tune with what's happening with your body, because then when that happens, you're like, oh, I remember this happened last time. You know, like I said, any shift, any major shift in your diet at all, in any direction, is going to shift things within the microbiome. And let me make a comment on the microbiome before we hop off. We hear a lot that a diverse microbiome is very important for gut health, and this is why they say you have to be consuming so much variety of foods. And I've seen, and here's the thing, if you don't want to live your life as a carnivore the rest of your life, that's okay. I'm not going to tell you every single person that that's what they need to do. So your body is going to adapt to what you do. So if you take something out for an extended period of time, when you try to introduce that thing back in, your gut microbiome has shifted. And so you may experience some symptoms. And the bigger question you have to ask yourself is, do I want this thing in my life or not? One of my favorites, Dr. Sivas, I was just watching something he shared, and he was talking about this, and he said, some people say, my sugar addiction is worth it to me to have all these digestive problems. He's like, you know what? Feeling normal is worth it to me to not have my sugar addiction. Everybody gets to decide where they want to sit with it. Whether you want to incorporate some fruits or some veggies or any level of those things. But it's a question of, there are consequences, right? How am I going to feel? I have to dive into and journal and learn my body. But I also need to be open to whatever I might receive, whatever information I might receive. If I'm learning that my body doesn't do well with certain foods, I have to ask myself, would I rather let go of this attachment to this food, or would I rather stay sick? I can't answer that for you, so it's up to you. Sometimes over the years, I've dealt with the consequences of the dairy because it was worth it to me in that moment, or the gluten, or whatever the thing was. But it's not worth it to me to do that on a regular basis. And so if you've done the elimination thing, and now, let's say you're and this is another thing that a practitioner can help you with, is the reintroduction phase. If you want to go carnivore or do any kind of elimination diet and then start to bring things back in, but you're kind of afraid of what that process might be like, work with a practitioner. You'll have somebody to hold your hand and walk you through it. Like I said, I'm testing out yogurts and cottage cheese. And so far it's been going really well. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to expand and do some other dairy products. But so far so good. And this is after a year on carnivore. So, and treating the gut issues that I had with herbals and therapeutics with a functional doctor. So it is very possible that you could heal these things and be able to incorporate some of the things that you love, that you've given up for sake of your health. But also know this: if you go back to a standard American diet, if you go back to processed packaged foods as a lifestyle, you will recreate all the problems that you spent all this time healing. So keep that in mind. All right, loves, with that, there are no more new comments. Oh, let's see. Tori said, had to do AIP elimination and single food testing for a year. Oh, yeah. Oh, beating Lyme's disease. Yeah, boom. Okay, yeah, that's a great example of when it's worth it to go through it, right? This is when we have to work on our mindset and separating ourselves from these attachments because they're not serving us. At the end of the day, I used to say way back at the beginning of my journey, what would you do if you had cancer? Would you just decide to just keep living the way you're living? And I use that as an example because it's such a strong one. Lyme's is a good example. Autoimmune, for many of you, it's not worth it to go through what you're going to go through with those foods in your life. So I always used to say that my symptoms were a blessing, that all of my issues were a blessing, because if not, I would probably just eat and eat to my heart's content. But I'd be wrecking myself on the inside internally, and eventually it would have caught up with me. So I'm grateful that I had these issues while I was young because it forced me to do that work. Oh, Alice says it was the keto products that messed up your stomach. Oh yeah. Yep. I think we've all been there. Yep. And I tell you, I have read like every single keto bar because every time I see a new one, I'm like, oh, what do they do with this one? Just on the off chance that maybe it's a little cleaner, but nope. I mean, I make my own stuff all the time that would be similar to that, but just without all the crap. It's so highly unnecessary and it drives me crazy that these companies do that. But I guess when you're doing large production and it has to be shelf stable, like there's a whole lot more, I don't have to worry about that when I'm just making one single serving in my kitchen for myself. But that's what I would recommend all of you do. If you're craving something, there's always a way to recreate it, but do it without do it without all the flours, the coconut flour, the almond flour, all the crap. Like, you know, um, honestly, carnivore has like, if you can handle dairy, there's a lot of things you can do with cheeses and cream and butter and stuff like that on the carnivore diet that I've seen out there. Um, but also, like, I'll do things like cocoa powder and beef isolate or gelatin and um, the liquid stevia where I can control how many drops I'm putting in there, and it tastes just as good, probably better than a lot of those fake tasting processed keto foods on the market, and I can make it to fit my macros. So, and these days we have people like Maria Emmerich with all these recipes out here. There's a lot that we can do within the confines of the diet that we select that will keep us from going through all that crap and further exacerbating a problem. So the cheats are not worth it most of the time. All right, ladies. And with that, I'm going to do the final third goodbye and sign off for the night. I hope that this has helped you and given you some things to think about as it relates to your gut health. If you try any of these things, do let me know. If you are interested in nutritional therapy, coaching, nutritional therapy, protocols or supplementation or anything like that, just tag me or drop me a DM. Like I said, I haven't been actively promoting that service, but I'd be willing to take on a handful of clients if that's something that y'all are interested in, or even like a one-time consult where we can just go over what's going on with you. I can put you through the nutritional therapy process and just do a one-time recommendation follow-up. And we'll see what we can do from that. I mentioned on previous master classes that eventually I will have some supplement protocols. I do have a supplement dispensary, but right now I only use it with clients on an as needed basis. But as I build those things out, I will let you all know so you can get reputable brands at a discounted price, and things that are vetted or CoachNat approved, as so many of you like to say. Okay, ladies, have a wonderful week. Crush it this week, and I will see you in the group. Night.